So, Ocarina of Time. I'm sure you have all at least heard your favorite YouTubers talk about this game multiple times already. This game was revolutionary when it came out, shaping gaming as we know it, and I think I can get away with saying that without it seeming like an exaggeration. Ocarina of Time has been looked at as the greatest game ever made, and has held that spot for quite a while on different sites and forums. Back when I was a child, none of my friends had played this game, since we grew up with the Wii, Xbox 360, and PS3 era, and I was the only one who grew up with the N64 or a GameCube. I played this game so much as a child, claiming it as my favorite game ever, along with Donkey Kong 64 and Super Smash Bros. Melee. Yeah, I didn't have amazing taste, and I still don't, but I digress. Around 2011, when this game got its 3DS remake, people started to really look at it with a more critical eye. Did this game still live up to what we all remembered as children? Well, today I want to figure that out, starting off with my 3D Zelda Retrospective. I've wanted to relook at these games for quite a while now. They all mean a lot and have huge memories in my brain that I will never forget, for better and for worse. We obviously are starting off with the game that started the 3D Zelda series, Ocarina of Time. This video will help be a catalyst for how I truly feel about this game. Around 2014, when I finally got my hands on the 3DS remake, I started to really question if this game was truly what I always felt about it. Amazing, timeless, damn near perfect, always fun to play. These statements were what I would say to my friends when they would ask me about this game, but I'm not so sure that these statements still hold up. I've been battling my feelings toward this game with a critical eye for a lot of years now, and I think I'm finally ready to sit down and figure out if this game is as fantastic and timeless as I always thought it was back then. Now, sit back and get ready, for we are kicking off my Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Retrospective. Now, before we begin, I want to address the elephant in the room. Yes, I am playing the N64 version, more specifically the GameCube re-release instead of the 3DS version. Now why is this? Well, to be completely honest, it's because I lack a 3DS capture card. I was looking into buying one for both this video and the eventual Majora's Mask video, but they are so expensive with no real good place to buy them. My plan is when I do eventually get one, I will do a retrospective on the 3DS versions, addressing the changes and what they brought to the table. If you haven't played Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask and are interested in them whatsoever after these videos, please play the 3DS versions, especially for Ocarina of Time. The 3DS version does nothing but bring quality of life changes and should be the version everyone plays these days. That being said, when issues in the N64 version come up that 3DS fixes, I will be sure to bring up that fact to make sure I'm not bitching about anything that hasn't already been addressed in the future. Now, with that out of the way, let us begin. Again, sorry. When looking at Ocarina of Time, I never really looked at it as a classic. See, Final Fantasy VII is a classic. Resident Evil 4 is a classic. Fuck, even The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past is a classic. Ocarina of Time, to me, was never a classic. It's a legend. Now, before you yell at me, just give me a moment to explain. It isn't just some funny wordplay, I promise. Ocarina of Time has a story that is very simple, probably a side effect of the game being the first 3D Zelda game after all. Link wakes up, is given a fairy companion, and is told of the past events that are leading to what legend he will face ahead of him. The story of Ocarina of Time is so basic. The story is very simple. The story is very predictable. The story is very been there, seen that. However, this may just be one of Ocarina of Time's biggest strengths. The story is so simple, yet invokes such strong feelings of a legend passed down from generation to generation. Later games will use Ocarina of Time to help build the world that they are using for said game. Ocarina of Time is very good at establishing a set of races, characters in said races, regions in which they live. Everything that happens in this game is absolutely fantastic at setting up a legend. The story that will be told for ages. Link is such a good vessel to lead the charge. He is a boy who is made fun of by the kids in the Kokiri Forest for being different with no fairy. He's an underdog who rises up to the challenge presented to him and is able to stop the ever so oppressive Ganondorf, who makes an amazing villain to this legend. He is so intimidating and makes a great driving force to the legend that is being written. Hailing from the mysterious Gerudo Desert, Ganondorf is able to use Link to sneak into the secret realm and get his hands on the Triforce of Power. And once Link is back 7 years later, Ganondorf is ready for him. He isn't plotting anything crazy that Link needs to stop or anything. He already has done what he wanted. He now rules Hyrule. He has all the power on his side of the court, and Link shouldn't have any chance of beating this opposing force. Along with Link, Zelda also is there to help with Ganondorf, though in a less direct way. She helps jumpstart Link with his journey, with her vision that comes in a dream. Zelda was always interesting to me because Zelda indirectly ends up causing the events of the whole story. Because she sent Link to get the 3 stones, and because she throws him the Ocarina of Time, teaching him the Song of Time and locking him in the Sacred Realm with the Master Sword, she leads Ganondorf to the Triforce of Power. She reconciles about this at the end to Link, apologizing to him and sending him back to his time, allowing him to truly live out his life the way he was meant to. This is so interesting to me, and in any other game I would be begging them to expand this idea. Tell us more about Zelda, about how she feels about this. Show us her growing towards this through Sheik and developing how she ends up in the end. But I've never felt the need for this in Ocarina of Time. The reason why? Because Ocarina of Time is a legend that helps set the foundation for the entire franchise. When playing this game, the story feels like you're reliving the events that are being told to you. If at the end it turned out we were a child being read to and the story was a book, I wouldn't be surprised. That was how it felt to experience this game to me. It is an epic legend passed down generation to generation, and no matter how much time passes, the story of an underdog loner getting the chance to prove himself, being guided by a princess, gaining new powers, traveling through time itself, all to stop an evil presence who will ruin life for everyone, will never ever get old. Ocarina of Time has interesting characters. Characters like Darunia, Nabooru, and Talon. They're great. Their personalities are fun. Not necessarily deep or anything, but they don't need to be. These characters are fantastic for different reasons when on screen, and when the two of them, Darunia and Nabooru, become sages, it makes sense in the context of the area you're in. You know these characters, and now they're repaying Link for the help he gave them before. Sadly, this is not true for most characters. Princess Zelda, Princess Ruto, Saria, Malon, Rahuru, and even Impa just do not get enough screen time for all the depth that they are supposed to bring to the narrative. The two that are the worst with this are Zelda and Saria. Easy. I talked about Zelda a bit earlier, so let us focus on Saria here. We are introduced to her within the first 5 minutes of this game. We are told that she and Link are friends, her being nice and helping Link even when all the other Kokiri children pester him for being so different from everyone else. After completing the first dungeon and going out to embark on his quest, Saria stops Link and gives him the fairy ocarina and tells him not to forget about her and be careful. This is a really touching moment and all, but who is Saria? When Link gets to the forest temple and we find out that Saria is a forest sage, it is supposed to be a big deal that being your childhood friend is now in a position far beyond what the Kokiri are ever expected to live. But we have only ever talked to Saria 2 total times. When we left the forest and when we came back to learn a specific song just to progress the plot. More on that later. Saria is barely seen and we are expected to feel like it is a big deal when she is becoming a sage. And aside from Darunia and sort of Nabooru, this can fit for all the sages. They're all barely seen and then Link reacts like it's a big deal when they're in the Sacred Realm with the rest. It isn't a super huge deal when you take into consideration that the simple bare bones plot they are trying to use to wrap this legend, but still something a little jarring and worth noting. Okay, so now that all that story nonsense is out of the way that no Zelda fan whatsoever, except for me, cares about, what exactly does one do in this game? Well, the main draw is exploration and the dungeons. We'll start with the dungeons as that will be a bit easier to explain. Ocarina of Time has 8 dungeons total, 3 of those being as Child Link, and the other 5 being as Adult Link. Our first dungeon we enter is inside the Great Deku Tree. This one is a bit hard to judge, because it is very easy and linear and boring. However, this dungeon is very good at showing the player just how these dungeons are going to work through the entire game. There is a map and a compass to collect. Each dungeon will have an item to help you progress. The depth of the puzzles, such as 3D awareness, block pushing, shooting the eyes, and using previously gained information with the Deku Scrub 23 is number 1 to progress later on. Deku Tree also allowed many kids growing up, including myself, to truly get to grips with the strange 3D control. Link in this game controls fairly simple, but with the lack of a second analog stick, your camera will be fixed to behind your back with the Z trigger or the L trigger if you're playing on later re-releases or the 3DS, as you should be. This trigger will also allow the player to lock onto enemies, making combat a lot easier. To be fair, Zelda combat is almost never an issue and is very easy. I never thought of Zelda as a combat-focused game, but if you were expecting to be challenged in any form with this game from enemies, that isn't going to happen for quite a while. The Z-targeting system works great though, and is very easy to get accustomed to, but after the tutorial dungeon, the next one Link will stumble upon is the Dango's Cavern. Though also very linear like the Deku Tree and our last child dungeon, inside Jabu Jabu's belly, these two dungeons do a good job at emphasizing more exploration within these dungeons. Both have multiple pathways the player can take, more optional rooms to find to be rewarded for, and more difficult puzzles. None of them are hard by any means, but take more thought than the likes of the Deku Tree. But these three dungeons don't really need to be all that great. They aren't supposed to be all that brain-taxing or difficult to progress through. These dungeons are tutorials, and help show the player just what awaits them as they get further into the game and find more difficult things in their pathway. Now, once you get that fancy blue ocarina and progress 7 years into the not-so-pretty future, we have 5 temples to progress to. Now, these temples all range from brilliant to very boring, but none of them are offensive, and I think most are fun to go through the entire way through. Let's get the worst one out of the way, the Shadow Temple. This temple I used to love because it was so dark and creepy when looking at the rest of the game. You're essentially in a giant tomb that tries to trick you with illusions and whatnot. On paper, this temple should be amazing, but in execution, it's fine. This is the lamest temple in terms of design, as you don't really do too much that makes your head scratch. The main gimmick that they really want to focus on is the Lens of Truth, which is fine and dandy, but when all it does is have you turn them on and then look to see what you're missing, you get very bored, and you get used to the temple's tricks very fast. Not only that, but this temple also has the downside of having the most frustrating boss in the game. Bongo is notorious amongst my friends for being such an asshole. My friends and I have a group channel where we played through Ocarina of Time for Alex's first time, and we spent a good half an hour on this guy, and not in a fun Dark Souls way. For my playthrough for the Retrospective, he housed my only death of the entire run. So what is it that makes this boss so irritating? Really, it's just the camera. This boss would work great if he had an analog stick for camera movement, but since we don't, the camera gets stuck on the hands when you're trying to center it, or trying to get the second hand before he counterattacks your ass. This is the most frustrating boss in the game, but not the weakest. That honor is held by the Water Temple. If you have ever heard of Ocarina of Time, which you have multiple times in this video alone, you have heard the misery of the Water Temple. But in the discussion of how bad the Water Temple was, I think people missed the issue with it. The Water Temple is easily the best temple in the game in case of design. The issue is traversing the temple is a complete slog, even when you do know what you're doing. The iron boots being put in the ever so slowly moving and loading item subscreen was definitely an oversight when the developers were working on the game, but one nonetheless that hurts the temple tremendously. Playing the 3DS version, they fixed this issue, meaning you should be playing the 3DS version. But one issue that cannot be fixed is the water level system. The temple has you progressing to these set points across the temple that, after playing Zelda's Lullaby, will change the water level according to which point you are at. The issue is when you forget that one key and need to backtrack, your ass is wasting another 5 minutes on top of getting to the room you're missing because you need to change the water level to low, and then change it to medium, get the key, and then change it back to high, and then get back to where you were. If I were to throw ideas at a dartboard, I would maybe suggest a central area where you could go to and change the water level to whatever one you need right there and then. Maybe that would make the temple worse, but I don't make video games, so all I can do is theorize and dream of my silly idea. Aside from that, the temple is really great and is really the only one that has you truly searching every part for keys and progression the whole way through. Then you get to the boss. Morpha is fine. He isn't hard at all, which is fine. The issue with him is that you do a lot of waiting for him to get to a specific location so you can grapple him, so that you can swing your sword once or twice so you can watch him get away, so you can repeat the process until he dies. Not hard or necessarily bad, just very boring. Now, the water temple might be what I think is the best temple in the game, but my favorite is easily the spirit temple. Right off the bat, it gets points for having a song that is actually a melody. The water temple has a nice piece, but the rest of the temple's music is very atmospheric, which means there is nothing to really hum along to or whatnot. A small thing, but a thing nonetheless. The spirit temple is very clever, where when you first enter, you cannot accomplish a damn thing. You find out from Sheik that you need to return as a kid to get an item in the first half to help you progress through the second half. This gimmick is so fantastic as a cap-off for the entire journey before Ganondorf. You explore this temple as both child and adult, meaning you are tested on your skills with both of them and have to be able to use both to their fullest ability. This temple is pretty linear when compared to the likes of the water temple, but the concept is really cool and the things you do inside the temple are fun. The way puzzles work in this game are very interesting. You don't really have puzzles, but more 3D awareness checks. There was a part in the forest temple where the hallway was all funky, which means that the room it leads up to gives you access to only one of the two exits you can take. If you leave the hallway, turn around, and shoot the eye above the door, the hallway will straighten out, giving you access to the other exit that you didn't have access to before. There are a lot of rooms like this in the game, which isn't a bad thing. It actually makes progression very fun, scouring the room to see which gem you need to strike when, or if you should shoot something before or after you explore the area you're currently in. The issue is that if you're planning to tax your brain on the offered puzzles, you won't really find that here. Though, considering how progression works when you're going to dungeons, maybe that might be a good thing. Growing up, I spent a lot of time in Ocarina of Time. I would say my save file had up to maybe 60 hours in it before I eventually made it to the end credits. Now, when I was a kid, I always told myself it took so long because the game was fun and I enjoyed exploring. But I'm not so sure that is really the case or ever was the case. Progression in Ocarina of Time is very obtuse most to all of the time, and this became very apparent with my recent playthrough with my friends. Let me just go through a spitfire explanation of how to progress into each dungeon. It'll help, I assure you. After Deku Tree, you have a very heartfelt goodbye with your childhood friend, Saria, who gives you the fairy ocarina she made just for you. You then travel to Hyrule Castle to meet with Princess Zelda, who teams up with you and has Impa teach you Zelda's lullaby and direct you towards the first destination, Death Mountain. Except to progress, you need to ignore Impa, go back to go see Saria, who you just said goodbye to, so she can teach you Saria's song, so you can then go to Death Mountain and play it to Darunia, so he can give you the power gauntlet to get into Dodongo's cavern. Alright, it can't get worse than that, right? Right? Well, on your way to the next dungeon, Zora's Domain, you need to play this specific minigame in order to get the scale you need to progress. A little strange, but he's right next to King Zora, so whatever. You then need to take this hole to Lake Hylia, find this bottle, and see that there's a letter from Princess Ruto saying she's stuck in the belly of Jabu Jabu. Alright, it makes sense then to show this to King Zora, so he can slowly but surely move, letting you get to Jabu Jabu. Except he won't let you in. Now, how do you get inside Jabu Jabu? Well, go bottle a fish in Zora's domain and feed it to him, of course. What else? Yeah, this isn't very good video game progression. Why in the hell would the player know to do this? I think there's a sign saying don't feed Jabu Jabu, and maybe a Zora or two say something similar, but I have never seen either of these, and only ever heard people mention them when trying to defend this game. Okay then. Well, after Jabu Jabu, you luckily will run into the next plot progression, which tells you to go play the Song of Time with your new Ocarina of Time you just acquired. After transforming into an adult, Sheik tells you that you need to go to Kakariko Village before going to the Forest Temple in the Lost Woods. Cool. We have all the locations we need to go to. So, how am I supposed to know that the item I need is the hookshot, which I get by going to the graveyard in Kakariko, not even in the village technically, and pulling this specific gravestone, which led to nothing as a child, and revealing a race with the deceased Dampe, who afterward will reward you with the hookshot. People mention a ghost in the graveyard, but what makes the player think to pull something that as a child did absolutely nothing? Well, this may be the most tame example so far, but oh boy, are we about to get to the worst. After the Forest Temple, Navi will tell you that the cloud over Death Mountain seems awfully suspicious. Alright, so we need to go to Death Mountain, but once there, then what? There is no one there but a Goron who just keeps rolling around, and this giant who will sell you the giant's knife. The game then thinks that the proper way to progress through the game is you need to bomb the Goron, to then talk to him to get the fire tunic, which will open up access to inside Death Mountain Crater. There is literally no other point in the game where you need to do something like this. The fish for Jabu Jabu can be defended slightly in saying that it is a bottle tutorial where you will never know what you need and where, which kind of helps with knowing that bugs go in soft soil, which you're supposed to learn from the Gossip Stone, which who the fuck does that? But no, this Goron needing to be bombed to progress, something that is not ever done aside from a side quest that most of your players on the first playthrough probably didn't do. This is the prime example of how not to do progression in a video game, and what I think is one of, if not the most egregious thing that keeps this game from being timeless. Aside from the funny glitch with the Shadow Temple cutscene trigger in the N64 version, the rest of the temples aren't bad and pretty straightforward. It just hurts so very much that playing this game is so hard and not in a good way. Opposed to games where difficulty is the main purpose and it is actually fun to try to figure out progression, a good example being the Resident Evil games, Ocarina of Time goes heavily into the frustration aspect of plot progression, which hinders its availability for new players. Okay, so we have discussed story, temples, and main plot progression. So what else is there to talk about then? Well, everything that you will be doing outside of required progression. Oh yeah, baby, it is time to talk about the world and the many side quests it holds. I don't want to dwell on this too much, but it does need to be addressed. Hyrule Field fucking blows. It is very empty and so very slow to move through until you get Epona later on, and only as an adult, and only if you go out of your way to find her. Yeah, Epona is completely optional, which always was a bit strange to me, but works. Hyrule Field is bad, bland, empty, slow, and overall just not fun whatsoever. I agree with all of those sentiments, but I want to focus more on the things you can do in the land of Hyrule. There are a good amount of side quests in this game that all give great rewards, from pieces of heart, to bottles, to upgrades to your equipment, to even a stronger sword. You will never be disappointed with what you get when you do a side quest. Now, the side quests themselves, yeah, I do not like most of these. Let's start slow. The Golden Skulltula side quest is a good example of a great idea. There are 100 Skulltulas around Hyrule, and your job is to find all of them. They can be collected before you know what for, and the map does a good job at telling you if you have all of them in a section of the world or not. The issue with this quest is that there isn't much reason to get any more after 50. The first 50 give you great rewards, and if you go out of your way to find all of them, you get 200 rupees every time you enter, at a point where money is worthless. I know I just got done saying the rewards are always worth it, but I guess I'm starting with the exception to the rule. If the reward was better, I would have no qualms with this side quest at all. Maybe they could tell you about the bugs in the soil better, but that is something that may be annoying, but is only for less than 10 of the bugs. There are some side quests where you need to do archery of some sort with precise shooting. On the 3DS these are fun, but on the N64 I remember them being a nightmare. Going back to the older game, they weren't as bad as I remembered. The game is pretty generous and should really only take you 2 or 3 tries to get all the rewards you can obtain. No. The example of shitty control I want to use is none other than Bombchu Bowling. Holy shit, is this the worst minigame in the game. You need to guide 3 Bombchus into 3 targets. You have 10 tries. That isn't super bad. The issue is that the Bombchus love to not go in a straight line, and these random ass moving chickens are infuriating, especially since they stay in place for eons after you hit them once. And maybe the worst part about it all is that you have to do this game 3 different times for 3 different rewards. A bigger bomb bag, a piece of heart, and Bombchus. I dread this minigame so much every time I play this game, but somehow it isn't even the worst one. No. That pleasure is held by the ever so lovely fishing hole. The fishing hole is needed for 2 different items, a piece of heart and the golden scale, which is then used to get another piece of heart. So you essentially do this twice for a half a heart container. That's fine. The issue is that fishing is not fun and doesn't really work half the time. I'm not sure, but what I am sure of is that I've been playing this game for roughly 16 years now, and I dread this part every single time, and it is always reasonably so. For both pieces of heart, you have to get your fishing lure to a specific part of the pond to get a specific fish. This specific fish is the biggest in the pond, so it isn't super hard to tell him apart once you know where he is. Once he actually grabs the lure, which will take quite some fucking time, now is where the fun begins. The way it works is you're supposed to pull the stick away from the fish and to the left and right, I think. Sometimes this works almost right away, and sometimes it causes the fish to let go within 10 seconds of grabbing the damn lure. The fishing is so inconsistent that it becomes so goddamn irritating that you want to rip out your hair. I've heard of people's theories of how they think it works, but I'm not sure if they are true or not, but I digress. Overall, Ocarina of Time has very mediocre side quests. One I forgot to mention was the Bigoron Sword side quest, which the reward is fantastic. A giant 2-handed sword that does more damage, trading out your shield in the process. The quest itself isn't anything absolutely egregious, but it is far from interesting or engaging. You just take different items from one person to the next until you get to the end, and a big Goron has you play Sun Song 4 times in a row so you can actually trade the final item. A little tedious, but nothing horrible. And with all of that out of the way, it is time to finally wrap this game up. After Link gets all 3 spiritual stones and gets his way into the Temple of Time, he takes up the Master Sword, where it then seals Link away for 7 years, because Link wasn't old enough to truly master it, I suppose. In doing this, Link opens up the Sacred Realm, and Ganondorf is able to walk in and take the Triforce. However, in doing so, he only obtains the Triforce of Power, and is now on the search for the bearer of the Triforce of Wisdom, and the holder of the Triforce of Courage. As an adult 7 years later, this strange old man in the Sacred Realm named Rauru tells Link what has happened, and tells him he needs to travel to the 5 areas of the land to obtain the 5 medallions, and to help the rest of the sages. He then gives Link his first medallion and sends him on his way. While Link goes through these temples and whatnot, he consistently is running into Sheik, who helps him through hints of progression, sometimes, and giving Link the song he needs to learn in order to move through the boring wasteland that is Hyrule a little bit faster. Rinse and repeat this up until the end of the Spirit Temple, where Link then heads to the Temple of Time and meets up with Sheik. After a lot of plot dumping, Sheik reveals to Link that she is actually Princess Zelda in disguise, and as cool as that may be, it may have been stupid to reveal this so soon, because not long after, Ganondorf appeals his big-ass crystal and captures Zelda, taking her to his tower. Ganon's tower is a pretty fun temple, and a fantastic way to finish off this legendary tale. After completing the 5 trials that consist of things you've seen through your travels, Link then begins his ascension to Ganondorf's throne room. Once he enters, all 3 pieces of the Triforce react, and after exchanging words with the ever so menacing Ganondorf, he lifts off into the air, beginning the final confrontation. The fight with Ganondorf isn't anything super hard, but is kind of boring. You bounce the energy spheres back and forth until they hit him. You then need to shoot Ganondorf with the light arrow and approach through the horrific slowdown and attack until he falls. Though one thing I discovered when playing this game with my friends was that you can run out of arrows and magic, making the game soft-locked and you needing to reset. That was very interesting for me and kind of funny. Either way, Ganondorf falls and Zelda is freed. The issue is Ganondorf has decided to crash the tower as he falls. Zelda and Link narrowly escape, and before they can rejoice, Ganondorf is somehow still alive and kicking, and transforms into his ultimate form, Ganon. No subtitle, no nothing. Just Ganon. And though this fight is extremely easy, especially if you got the big Goron sword like you should have, this fight is so damn cool. The lighting of the N64 version is perfect, with Ganon's face hiding in the shadows, his ever-looming presence towering over Link. The final showdown to the fated legend that is ever so fitting. But once he falls, Zelda holds him down with the power of the light, and Link, Master Sword in hand, sticks that shit straight through his skull, ending it all for good. Zelda and Link have a final conversation before Zelda sends him back to his time to live out his childhood as he was supposed to. Navi flies off because who the hell knows why, and Link goes to see Zelda in the past to save his timeline and to live his life out as the unknown hero. Ocarina of Time, from 1998 for the Nintendo 64 and in 2011 for the Nintendo 3DS, is a good game. It helps set the foundation for games to precede it, much like Super Mario 64 did, or Half-Life 2 did, or even Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare did. But just like the examples listed, Ocarina of Time helped set a foundation, and has since been beaten by games that have been able to take what it has made and build further upon it. For everyone who grew up with Ocarina of Time and lived with the fantastic memories of the game and what it did to the video game industry, we will always look at Ocarina of Time with kind eyes. But for people like my friends, or the kids growing up today, who will see videos like this and want to see if the game is truly something for them, they won't find what was once there. Ocarina of Time is truly a legendary game. The story is a thrilling legend of a boy who answers to fate and drives away the evil who is taking over the land. The temples are fun, but all of them aren't anything special, nor do they really call for any thought to be had. The side quests are aged, with archaic design and not very fun things to do within them. Traveling is boring, but doesn't take needlessly long. The characters are fun, but they don't reach the heights that they needed to be truly great. The game has all of the right ideas, but suffers from being the first of its kind in my eyes. Ocarina of Time is a game that I will forever and always appreciate and love and hold so dear to me from the memories that I hold with it. However, I would be an absolute moron to say that it is still as fantastic as it once was. It is shadowed by not only future games from other companies with different ideas, but even later installments within the same franchise. Ocarina of Time will live within the hearts of the many who grew up with it, and will be seen as an epic legend told from generation to generation of its greatness and what it did to truly help innovate the industry. Ocarina of Time is flawed, and maybe not a 10 out of 10 game, but if you ask me, it still deserves its title of a timeless legend.